Look, let me paint a scene you've lived. It's Thursday night. You open your banking app, and instead of that familiar little punch in the stomach, you actually breathe. Not because you're rich, not because you made it, but because you can buy groceries without doing mental gymnastics, and you can say yes to a small expense without wondering if you just ruined your week. And here's the thing. There is a number where this shift tends to happen for normal, disciplined people. It's not even six figures. It's $20,000. And I know that sounds almost disrespectfully small compared to what the internet tells you, but $20,000 changes your life more than most people realize because it changes your mind, your options, and the math that starts working beside you instead of against you. And in a minute, I'm going to show you why everything changes even more after 20,000, psychologically, financially, and spiritually. But first, my name is David, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, wealth, and how stewardship actually compounds over time. If you're someone who feels like you're doing the responsible thing but still can't get traction, like you keep working, saving, and trying, yet money stays tight, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Now, here's the thing. Most people think wealth is mainly about income. If I just made more, I'd be fine. And yes, income matters. But that belief is incomplete because I've watched people making $80,000 stay broke for a decade and people making $45,000 build a cushion, invest consistently, and get free. So I'm going to challenge a few assumptions right away. More money does not automatically create peace. Faith does not replace structure. And you do not need a miracle. You need a threshold. Because there are financial thresholds that function like invisible doors. Before the door, everything feels uphill. After the door, life isn't easy, but it's different. And $20,000 is one of the first real doors. Let's be practical. When you have no buffer, your financial life is fragile. A tire, a doctor visit, a rent increase, anything turns into a crisis. And when life is a string of small crises, you don't build wealth, you just recover. Here's what most people don't realize. Money isn't just math, it's mental bandwidth. When you're constantly close to the edge, your brain goes into what researchers call scarcity mode. You become reactive. You take what you can get. You tolerate what you hate. You say yes when you mean no. You chase immediate relief instead of long-term growth. And spiritually, that's not a character flaw. That's a nervous system response. This is why some people know all the right financial advice and still can't execute it, because information isn't the bottleneck. Capacity is. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Vanguard published research showing that having just $2,000 in emergency savings is associated with a 21% increase in financial well-being. And having 3 to 6 months of expenses saved is linked to an additional 13% boost. Do you hear that? Not $1 million increases your well-being. 2,000. Because $2,000 moves you out of one problem away from disaster. And 3 to 6 months of expenses, often landing near $20,000 for many households, moves you out of survival mode into strategy mode. So let's name the real shift. The 20,000 shift is not about feeling rich. It's about exiting desperation. When you have $20,000, you can handle a surprise without panic. You can say no without fear. You can make a decision based on wisdom, not urgency. You can invest without constantly pulling money back out. It's not wealth. It's stability. And stability is the soil where wealth grows. Scripture says it like this: to whom much is given, much is required. And here's the part most people ignore. Requirement comes before increase. Stewardship comes before multiplication. You don't get entrusted with more by accident. Look, if you've ever tried pushing something heavy up a hill, you know the beginning is brutal. The first few feet feel like you're not moving at all. You're sweating, straining, questioning everything. But once that boulder starts rolling, momentum kicks in, and $20,000 is often the first moment you feel momentum. Everything before it feels like you're pushing uphill. Everything after it feels like gravity starts helping. But again, here's what most people don't realize. The gravity is not magic. It's a combination of improved psychology, improved options, improved compounding. Before 20,000, your brain asks, how do I survive until next payday? After 20,000, your brain starts asking, how do I grow this? That is a completely different life. And this is where the committee you mentioned, Dispenza, Neville, Watts, and Jesus, actually overlaps with biblical wisdom in a surprising way. Dispenza would say your identity shapes your outcomes. Goddard would say you live from the state, not toward it. Watts would say resistance creates suffering, especially when you're fighting what is. Jesus, very practically, teaches that fruit comes from the kind of tree you are becoming, and faithfulness over time produces harvest. Now listen carefully. I'm not telling you to manifest money. I'm telling you something more grounded. When you cross 20,000, you move into a new state, less fear, more clarity, and your decisions improve. And improved decisions compound. Let's do simple, real math. Say you can save and invest $1,000 per month, and you earn a long-term 8% average return in a diversified portfolio. How long to get to $20,000? Roughly 19 months, about a year and a half. And that year and a half feels like a grind because most of it is your contribution, not growth. But your next $20,000 tends to come faster because now your first $20,000 is also earning. It's not dramatic at first, but it's real. And as you scale, the acceleration becomes undeniable. Same effort, new momentum. This is why people who hit certain milestones start sounding lucky. They're not lucky. They're leveraged. But David, isn't 20,000 still small? Now you might be thinking, David, $20,000 doesn't change everything. I still have bills. I still have stress. Yes, but it changes the type of stress you have. Before 20,000, the stress is, will I make it? After 20,000, the stress becomes, how do I build? That's a better problem. And here's another thing that changes after 20,000. Money buys optionality. Optionality means you have choices. When you have zero cushion, you can't take risks. You can't change jobs easily. You can't invest patiently. You can't say no. But when you have a buffer, you can do something rare. You can wait for a better decision. And waiting for the better decision is a superpower because haste is expensive. One of the biggest changes at $20,000 is what I call walking away money. Not burn the bridge money, not quit your job and start a podcast money, just enough money that you're not trapped. And here's what happens when you're not trapped. You negotiate differently. You stop tolerating toxic environments. You start asking for what you're worth. You explore new opportunities because you can afford to take a calculated risk. And this is why 20,000 can increase income without you even trying harder. Your posture changes. Your confidence changes. Your options change. And people can feel that. The spending shift, you stop obsessing over small purchases and start optimizing big ones. This is where a lot of people misunderstand discipline. When you're broke, you obsess over $3 decisions. Generic cereal or name brand, coffee or no coffee, premium gas or regular. But after 20,000, your brain has room to zoom out. You start caring about housing, cars, savings rate, career trajectory, investment consistency, because those are the decisions that swing your life by tens of thousands. And this is where I'm going to be slightly frustrated because I want you to win. Most people lose financially because they make one or two big bad decisions, and then they spend years trying to fix it with tiny sacrifices. That's backwards. The biggest example, cars, I'm going to say something that may irritate you, but it's love. A lot of people are driving their future into the ground, have shown the total cost to own and operate a new vehicle can be around $965. That's not the payment. That's total cost. And depreciation is one of the biggest culprits. Now add this. Kelley Blue Book notes that new cars often lose around 20% or more in the first year and can lose up to approximately 60% over 5 years. Do you see what's happening? People work for money, then park it in something that bleeds value. Then they wonder why building wealth feels impossible. Look, cars aren't evil, but if you're trying to reach your first real threshold, you can't afford to build your identity on depreciation. And after 20,000, you stop asking, can I afford the monthly payment? You start asking, what is this decision costing me an opportunity? Here's an easy example. A $30,000 purchase isn't just $30,000. It's what that $30,000 could have become after 20 years invested. At 8% average growth, $30,000 can grow to roughly $140,000 over 20 years. At 10%, it's closer to $200,000 plus, and flashy cars are quietly funding stress. The secret isn't access, it's scale. Now you might be thinking, okay, but don't rich people have access to special investments? At the ultra high end, sure. But that is not what drives the 20K phenomenon. The 20K phenomenon is just basic math plus consistency, not life-changing. A 10% return on $20,000 is $2,000. Now we're talking about money you feel. And at 8% on $20,000, you're earning about $1,600 per year in growth. Money that showed up because your money finally had enough mass to work. Here's what most people don't realize. Saving $20,000 is not mainly about the money. It's proof you can delay gratification, resist impulse track. What matters, say no consistently, stay disciplined when nobody claps. And that is an identity milestone. That's why Dispenza talks about identity preceding outcomes. That's why Goddard emphasizes living from the state. That's why Scripture praises faithfulness in little things. Because once you become the kind of person who can build 20,000, you become the kind of person who can build $200,000. The who comes before the what. And this is where I need you to hear me. People hit $20,000, feel the relief, and then immediately spend it to reward themselves. New car, big vacation, bigger apartment. Down payment they can't sustain. Don't do that. That 20,000 is not the trophy. It's the foundation. It's the seed. And seeds are not meant to be eaten. They're meant to be planted. Okay, let's get painfully practical. If you're under $20,000 right now, here's your job. Build the buffer first before fancy investing. Start with $1,000 as a starter emergency fund. Then build toward 3 to 6 months of expenses. Put it in a high-yield savings account, simple, liquid. Automate the contributions, automatically transfer money on payday. Remove decision fatigue, make it boring. Stop the biggest leaks first. You don't need to cut everything. You need to stop the 1 or 2 expensive habits that keep you from momentum. Usually a car payment. You didn't need lifestyle creep on housing, eating out as a default subscriptions you forgot existed for. Increase income strategically, not work yourself into the ground, but skill upgrades that raise base pay, a side income stream aimed at savings negotiating once you have walking away money. Invest after the buffer is stable. Once your emergency fund is real, start investing consistently, index fund, retirement accounts, etc., not emotionally, because investing is a long obedience in the same direction. $20,000 won't make you rich overnight, but it will change your financial life because it changes your mental life. It moves you from reacting to designing desperation, to structure fear, to strategy. And faithful stewardship looks like this. Not panic, not comparison, not waiting for a miracle while ignoring discipline, but patient building, quiet consistency, wisdom over impulse. Because compounding doesn't reward intensity, it rewards consistency over time. So if you're not at 20,000 yet, don't be ashamed. Just get serious. Because you're not behind. You're at the part where most people quit, and you're not most people. If this helped you see money differently, hit the like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, how close are you to your first 20,000? And what's the biggest thing trying to slow you down right now? This is what faithful stewards do differently, and it works.